doesn't happen. You have to have the creation that our Father gave us, and you have to be in relation to that creation in order to get healing. It's the way it is. We have natural plants around us. Pulling one little part out of that plant isn't going to give you the positive effect of the plant. It'll only give you part of it. Now, this is what patent medicine and the pharmaceutical industry are predicated upon, is upon drawing out one little part and thinking they understand the whole thing.
That's because they can't patent natural plants.
Well, that's exactly right. They can't patent the natural plant. They can patent a strain like the U.S. Congress did. Now, they can't patent it, which means they can't control it, which means they can't profit from it, which means, guess what? It's probably good for you. All right? Now, the way that all this information has come to the forefront is just astonishing to me. And like I told you at the outset, I mean, I had a major mind shift because I was for legalization, but this has turned me into a rabid advocate for full legalization, for full access. And I do think that you shouldn't be giving it to your kids, okay? Unless your kid needs it. But this is the problem. With all of these medical initiatives, we got 23 states that have medical cannabis laws. Well, Colorado's supposed to be like the Mecca, if you will, of cannabis culture. Guess what's happening in Colorado? The children's hospitals are refusing to allow children access to medical cannabis because the insurance companies don't want to allow it, because the federal government doesn't want to allow it, because they want to keep them on a pharmaceutical treadmill that prevents them from healing. And if you, as a parent, give your child cannabis to heal them, you're a felon, and you can go to jail. And that's in Colorado, the Mecca of cannabis, right? This is it. Can you imagine? I would love to see anybody raise their hand and say that they want to stand between a parent and that parent helping their child and go, no, you can't do that because you got to go to jail if you do that.
Because of federal laws and because of pharmacy corporations can't
Right.
make any money out of it.
Well, that's exactly.
Why the federal laws are in place, because the pharmacy corporations paid to put the laws in place.
Exactly. And we got the best government that corporations can buy. Yeah. And it is the definition. It's a cartel and it is a conspiracy. It is that. But what we have to look at in our various states is how do we want to move forward with the knowledge that we have on cannabis, and how do we want to legalize it? How do we want to make it available? Or if we don't want to make it available to people. I mean, I want to make it available to people. It would make me really happy to be able to help somebody who was suffering or had their loved one suffering from a disease that I knew it would be beneficial for. I don't want to have to apply for permission, pay a massive license fee, subject myself to inspection, and all of this. I want to develop community. I want to develop our ability to care for ourselves and our ability to take care of each other. You know, so we have some decisions to make as we move forward with cannabis legalization, and it is going to happen. It's harder to get a constitutional amendment undone than done in Missouri. Okay? So what we have right now, we've got 3 of them, and 2 of them are 11 pages long and have regulatory processes within the language. And they will also, those 2 will both establish a veterans board that will benefit from the sales taxes associated with it. And there will be sales tax placed upon medically prescribed cannabis, and the doctors who are allowed to prescribe it will have to pay for a license to be allowed to prescribe it. The growers who would provide medical cannabis will have to pay for a license on a yearly basis and have that all monitored and tracking from seed to the plant, everything completely contained and totally secure. So those are two of them. Those are in Missouri. It's 2016 124 and 2016 125. They're both basically the same, and they establish a very tight control on people's ability to participate in an emerging market, on people's ability to access beneficial medication, and people's ability to decide for themselves whether or not they want to consume this. The other one that's available is 2016-013, and that one is a complete freedom of cannabis, and it deschedulizes it. It takes it off of Schedule 1 drug, and it requires the state of Missouri to stand up for its citizens against an encroachment by the federal government on this. Now, the reason that is so important is this. The other two initiatives, the 125 and 124, if they pass and you get a medical cannabis card, you will not be allowed to have a firearm, because the BATF has issued a statement to all these various gun organizations that anyone with a medical cannabis card is disqualified from gun ownership, because what they're doing by having a medical cannabis card is becoming a felon because it's against federal law. It's really convoluted reasoning, but that's their supposition. So if it isn't removed from a Schedule 1 drug in whatever state, then the federal government ostensibly can come in and impinge upon people's rights. So, that issue really needs to be taken care of. Now, one thing that's really funny about the whole deal, about every decade or so, the president will establish a committee to look into cannabis and whether or not it should be, quote-unquote, decriminalized or not. Every 10 years, the committees always come back with the same thing, saying this should be descheduled and people should be allowed to use it, and adults should be allowed to use it in their own home as they see fit. And every 10 years, the president ignores the committee's findings. It's almost like clockwork. Now, George Herbert Walker Bush, when he really ramped up the war on drugs, there's a video of him talking about how, we can get rid of all drugs. And in order to do so, they say, we're not going to have enough prisons. Well, we'll build more prisons. We don't have enough agents. We'll hire more agents. We don't have enough prison guards. We'll get more prison guards. We will eradicate drugs. Okay, so what has happened is now in the United States we got 2.3 million people in prison. 575,000 of them, roughly, are for nonviolent drug offenses. Now, the percentage of those that are cannabis related are a little more than half of that 575,000. It costs anywhere, depending on whose reports you want to believe, anywhere from $28,000 to $100,000 per prisoner per year. That's an awful lot of money on prisons in the most free country in the world.
A lot of that lockup is private companies too.
Right. Yeah, whack and hunt, right?
Right.
Yep. And And that brings about another issue, and that's exactly it. We have fascism in effect there. We have the government in business with private businesses in the prison industry. And this, we've created a real problem by having the entire war on drugs as a charade, But sticking to cannabis, if we just looked at the economic aspect of imprisoning people for nonviolent cannabis offenses, putting them through the parole system and all the probation costs, all the court costs, all of these kinds of costs, it's about $20 billion per year spent on cannabis. And most of these people are nonviolent. Now, why should we incarcerate for an average? Here's the average time on the street: 8.5 years in prison for nonviolent cannabis offenses. Okay? In 2013, 750,000 people were arrested on cannabis offenses. 42 seconds. Every 42 seconds, a person arrested for a cannabis offense. Is this really what we should be spending our public funding on? If they're not hurting anybody, is it a crime? These are things that we have to answer for ourselves. But the potential benefits from cannabis are, in the health realm, enormous. And it's a threat to the pharmaceutical industry, it's a threat to the insurance industry, and it's a positive for people. So, if we got to go up against insurance industries and pharmaceutical companies running ads, also, we can't forget one other major player in this is lawyers. Plenty of lawyers. The other two initiatives that I am going to actively oppose in Missouri are put together by lawyers who make about 90% of their money defending cannabis offenses. So they want to keep that payroll going. They want to keep having people have infractions on cannabis so that they can work it out. This is a phenomenal issue. It's got a whole lot of little ins and outs to it. And frankly, I think that if Missouri, being the show-me state, could fully legalize cannabis, we would be able to lead the nation in not just in cannabis that you smoke for enjoyment, but in hemp, in food, in fiber. There is some speculation that within Missouri, because of our climate and because of our soil and all of that, that we could actually grow about $1 trillion worth of hemp in Missouri. Now, that would be a pretty phenomenal economic boost. Right now, we have legalized, quote-unquote, hemp cultivation for 2 entities to go for medical use, for one company that processes it to provide for epileptic children. That was our great big legalization moment. There are 2 entities that are licensed and controlled by the state who are allowed to grow it, to give it to the one entity to make it for the very few children that will be allowed to have it after they've exhausted all other pharmaceutical options and their doctor says, okay, try it. And we recently had a lady over on the eastern side of Missouri moved to Colorado because her child has tremendous difficulty with epilepsy, and she's facing being a felon for getting something that helps her child to not have seizures all the time. Some of these things are so amazing. Children with, 300 seizures a week going down to 4. down to 4 seizures a week from 300. Now, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. That's very miraculous, you know. So we have all of these potentially helpful benefits from one little plant. We've got economic benefit, we've got food and fiber benefit, we've got medicinal benefit, and it's illegal. So I think that it's time, past time, that we become proactive for our own health, for our own family's benefit, and that we challenge this idea that we're too stupid to know what's good for us, that we don't, you know, we can't possibly self-medicate, for lack of a better term, that we don't have the right to take care of our own health and our own well-being, that has to be some kind of a licensed professional, and that we need to give that right up to them. So, you know, it's a lot smaller crowd than I thought there was going to be, but, you know, it seems like everybody pretty well knows that we've been lied to, and unfortunately we've become pretty controlled in our thinking. So,
since 1937.
right. Well, so Mom, yeah, almost 80 years now. Yep. And this was something that's another interesting fact. Like, in 1937, at that time, about 45% of the medications in the medical pharmacopoeia of the United States had cannabis as an ingredient in the medication. Okay? Then in 1941, that's when it was removed from the Pharmacopoeia Medica. Now, the history of cannabis as a medication goes back all the way through the history of humanity. In China, in 2600 BC, that's the earliest record that we have of using cannabis for medicine. And evidently, it looks like cannabis originated in Asia and India and moved westward with people, and they've been cultivating it for at least 6,000 years. And with the seed, I mean, the seed in itself is just phenomenal. It's got every single EFA in the right order that you need it, and that's how come it's helpful for Alzheimer's. That's what hemp seed is helpful for Alzheimer's, because the oils are right and it helps your brain neurons to fire correctly. It gives you complete protein. Nobody needs to be hungry. We don't have to have this, help the starving children. We could provide for everybody on Earth. It loves marginal soil. It does very well. So the history of it, the control factors of it, the prison industry side of it, the pharmaceutical side of it, the insurance side of it, the medical industrial complex side of it, if we can't get cannabis fully legalized, then we're doing our great-grandchildren, our grandchildren, our grandparents, our parents a major disservice. We all need to actively pursue that which sustains us and that which helps us to help others and ourselves. So, you know, I'm 1,000% sold, and I'd like to hear any thoughts on what might be a problem, or if there are other positive avenues to go down. Anybody have any comments, questions, concerns? Come on, David, you always got something to say.
I'm on board, man.
We have watched the movie, I believe it's called The Hemp Revolution.
Yep.
And yeah, they basically stated a lot of what you said.
Right. Yeah.
Very, very informative.
It's really kind of funny, too, because it's got like all these hippy-drippy trippy.
I have to say, you did make everything very clear for me. I've been kind of skeptical about some things, and I wasn't really sure about a lot of stuff, but the way you presented it to me was very straightforward. I picked up on it very well.
Well, I will not be profiting from any
Right.
of it.
No, the only way you profit is if we go out and be advocates like you.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Absolutely.
exactly correct. You know, and I don't grow it. I would grow it if I could grow it and not lose my farm.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's another aspect. Have a look at the seizure laws. This fellow over here, is that Shannon County? Gosh, okay. I'm not going to be able to recall the man's name, but this a couple years ago, he had like a music festival over in Shannon County, had about 400 acres over there. He had security guards and stuff like that. He told him, you know, don't worry too much about people smoking pot. You know, worry about fights, worry about hard drugs. Don't worry so much about pot. So what happened? They come in and they bust him for enabling people to use cannabis, and they put him in prison and took his property and are turning his property into a nice little Missouri State park. That is criminal. That's criminal. You're hurting somebody. You're taking what they worked for away from them without cause. The guy just said, don't worry so much about him smoking pot. And they stole his business, destroyed his livelihood, and put him in prison. Can I have a, yay, we're free? You know, and this is right in our own backyard, guys. This happens all the time. When I lived in Texas, I found out I owned a business. And we were right next to the sheriff's department, which was really good for us. But if I hired somebody and they came to work and they had a joint on them and the sheriff came by, they could take my business because this guy that I hired had a joint on him. I saw them tear apart an elderly couple's car right in front of our shop with a drug dog. They were an elderly Mexican couple, and they just left it right there. They had to put it all back together. You know, I mean, the seizure laws have tremendously benefited police and sheriff's departments and very, very much harmed the average person. Now, that's part of the war on drugs. That's not just cannabis. I'm sorry.
Turning the police into pirates.
Well, right. And there's another, you know, I have satellite internet, so if I'm going to watch, like, videos, I have to do it after midnight. There's a really good one. You guys should write this down. John Oliver on civil asset forfeiture. It's phenomenal. He goes through, and he makes it kind of funny, even though it's horrendously unpleasant. But, you know, like a family in Pennsylvania. Their son evidently had some heroin, and so they took the parents home. He had like enough for one dose, I guess. I don't know, I don't do heroin. I don't know much about it, but I don't like it. Anyway, they took their home away from them because their son had a very minuscule amount of heroin, and so they were just removed of their property because the new thing is that property is guilty of a crime. And they have all of these things with like United States versus 665,000 pounds of fish. You know, United States versus $285,000. And it's a very sad deal, but that is part of the criminal enterprise that really needs to be done away with. And within the state of Missouri, actually, there's one lovely testimony from the police department chief in Columbia in front of the Citizens Review Board and talking about civil asset forfeiture. And he's like, well, it's just, yeah, it's kind of like money that we get that we can just get things that we want. You know, it's kind of like, no, there aren't really limits on it. It's just free money. It's fun.
Piracy.
Piracy, yes. And you know, and this is a big problem. I mean, I believe that police are necessary, but they're not necessarily needed to take away our property from us without any due process, without any kind of issue. You know, um, so I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that we can get this good, fully legalized, no limits on how much you can grow, no regulating from the Constitution, but just legalize it, deschedule it, and then people who have been arrested on cannabis offenses, their records would be expunged for that. If it were nonviolent. Now, if it's violent, then it would stay on your record. So,
Why would the cannabis have to stay on your record if you've got violence on your record as long as it's not connected to your cannabis?
well, it's a matter of if you, that's going to stay that way for the violence, but the like issue is people who are non-violent offenders would no longer have a record. Okay.
That's what I'm saying, though, is regardless of whether you have a violent record or a non-violent record, you should still have your cannabis record expunged.
Right.
Unless you robbed somebody of their cannabis, or they can prove that the reason that you did whatever it was you did was because of cannabis.
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen because
Probably not. Yeah. I don't think they're going to overturn, like if you say you strong arm rob somebody of their cannabis, I don't think they're going to overturn that because the crime is actually the robbery, right?
right.
You know.
Well, that's connected with cannabis, but like I say you're somebody that goes out to the bars and gets drunk and beats people up, but then you smoke cannabis. That doesn't have
Two
anything to
different
do
things,
with
right? Non-related.
right.
Well, here, let me
I mean,
have
not
a gander
to
at
say
this.
that I'm a violent offender or whatever, but I'm just saying fairness is fairness.
Well, I agree. You know, but you see, everything else that's being thrown out there doesn't descheduleize it, and it doesn't expunge records.
Right.
This is, you know, I was supposed to have a box of this material here, but the person had to go to a funeral and they forgot to leave it for me, so I can only look at this one here. Let's see what it says.